Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back from the ad break. You are still watching Prime Live. Now, we are joined by Norleen Zulu, who is an expert in early childhood development, and she'll be sharing her insights about National Children's Day. And recently took place Saturday. And the celebration aims to bring attention to children's rights and the progress made in ensuring their well-being. I think this is such a critical conversation to have because we have been, discussing the significance of protecting children's rights and also making sure that we are fully aware of their well-being, especially when they are around adults. Thank you so much for joining us, Norleen, on Prime Life, and welcome again.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Now, can you please tell us more about the origins and the global observance of Children's Day?
Okay, so Children's Day is celebrated not just nationally but globally, and it comes from way back. So after the Second World War, children were very vulnerable, and it was starkly evident. So in 1925, a conference for the well-being of children was held in Geneva, and it was here that Children's Day was first proclaimed. And then the nexus of it generally was to protect children and to provide for their needs, right? So the United Nations established UNICEF in 1954, no, sorry, 1946. And they did this to enforce and establish children's welfare. And then move over to 1959, November 20, a United Nations held a General Assembly, and there they adopted the Declaration of Children's Rights. And then again, we move forward to November 20, 1989. United Nations further adopted a more comprehensive convention on the rights of children, right? And it's currently the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history. So when we come closer to home, in South Africa, we celebrate Children's Day on the first Saturday of November, but we also continue to celebrate or promote the reflection of our progress in the children's welfare and being taken care of, and how children are growing throughout the month. So we look at the dignity of children and how their livelihoods are going throughout November. So it's actually National Children's Month as opposed to just Children's Day that we commemorate. So we dedicate the whole of that to November, where we look at Section 28 of our Constitution that really talks about children's welfare and how they need to be raised.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm sure there's a lot of people who weren't aware, and we definitely are learning a lot in this conversation. Now, can you tell us what are some key achievements in Children's Day that National Children's Day actually highlights?
Okay, so like we've made great progress in sort of the welfare of children. So there's been a lot of promotion of children's rights. So abolishing things like child labor and child marriage. We've got access to education for all children, and there's better health care. So there is a huge drop in child mortality, and obviously the access to like our vaccines and everything that children need. And there's a lot of protection for the children. So I think I did touch on child marriage, that it was also abolished. And then we look at children also being given rights and voices to be heard and platforms to advocate for themselves. So if we look at instances like child parliament, where we have children that have their own parliament and they can sit in parliament and talk about the things that bother them or their concerns and their worries, and they can actively have activisms and advocate for themselves. So I think we've made great strides in terms of children's welfare. And then in South Africa, we have probably a world's best constitution regarding children, or the Children's Act. So we're leading in things like access to basic education, child health services, and ensuring that every child, regardless of their background, receives quality care and equal opportunity. So I think we've made great strides from the 1920s to current date.
That's great news to hear. Now, I want us to talk about, ways in which parents, educators, and communities can all come together to support children's development and their rights.
Mm. So I think, and this is a message I always preach, that the development of children it's a conglomerate effort. So it requires every stakeholder to be a part of it. Meaning, whether you're a parent or a teacher or in parliament or you're just a passerby, you all have a role to play in the welfare of children and in their educational journey as well as their just progress and growth. Okay, so education really needs to go beyond academics and what's happening in the classroom to include things like emotional intelligence, teaching children critical skills, how to analyze something and how to solve a problem, how to think differently and outside the box. And we should all play a role in, I guess, identifying and supporting vulnerable children, because we are basically the frontline defenders of children. So any problem that a child has can be solved by an adult. So it falls upon us. The onus is on us to be the identifiers of the vulnerability and to be assisting in all the challenges that they may face. Um, and more than that, I think we need to move away from punitive measures used against children in terms of punishment and move into a place of positive discipline, be it in the home or in the classroom. Look at the measures that we're taking to say if a child is out of line or falling away, what can we do about it? Is beating up a child always the only solution to our challenges? And we should find more positive ways to discipline our children. And I think this helps support children in their growth and their development and in basically their overall livelihood.
Hmm. And you know what? Before it actually, I go to my next question. I want to touch on, um, just what you've spoken about disciplining the children. And I think that's a very sensitive topic, but also a very crucial one because I think that's where a lot of people struggle to, conversate or rather create a relationship with children because a child does something wrong. It can either be a parent in school, a teacher, or just a member of society whereby we struggle to find a healthier way of reprimanding children, and we always feel like maybe giving them a little bit of a hit on their hand or whatever it is will make them understand and hear you better. So what is the healthier way of reprimanding a child, and what happens when that doesn't work? Would you say then move on to the next step of, I don't know, punishing them? What are ways in which parents can induce in their children's lives to make sure that there's a healthy parent and child relationship?
I mean, progressively, discipline needs to start at some point and lead to another point. We
Mm,
can't always start at the highest level of reaction to every situation. And I think, as if we introspectively think about this and we look within ourselves, we have a lot of tools within our arsenal to be able to deal with our children's challenges. So I think the first thing is we always need to talk about things before they escalate. So we need to have rules, whether we are institutions or we are parents at home. There has to be a rule book or a guideline that the child lives by. Okay, children should have freedom but within boundaries, so there must be boundaries. So you need to teach these boundaries before you react to whatever the child has done. So for instance, if you haven't sat down and spoken to your child about maybe using a certain type of language or vulgar language, and then when you hear them say a bad word, then you immediately slap them. Have you done your part as a parent, which is your first port of call? Have you done your part to teach your child that this is not what we do and there are consequences for this behavior? So conversations are of paramount importance. Conversations about rules, about things that are acceptable and are not acceptable. And then going into consequences for behavior. So there should be consequences that are equivalent to the act or the misconduct or misbehavior that the child has presented. So, for example, if your child has stolen sugar and put it in their mouth, I don't think you would get your belt and smack them, right? You would have a sort of a timeout or some privilege taken away, or you know any kind of reprimand that you have that is minimal and in alignment with the act that the child has committed. And as it goes higher, also, I guess the consequence goes higher. But I think beating a child is always your last option because it just builds rebellion. So there should be other ways to bring this child, rehabilitate this child, correct them, and bring them back into line and into what we want. And obviously, at some point, it does get and it becomes unlivable, or the child can behave in a way that is just unacceptable, completely unacceptable. And then yes, then you can then bring in your last port of call in terms of punishment. But talk to your children, so conversate about the things that are not acceptable, talk about the consequences of behavior and follow through on those consequences. Oftentimes, because we as parents are absent. We're not there, our children are being raised by other people, so we come in with compensatory behavior, or on the flip side, extreme behavior. Both ways don't really work. So take time out, be present, figure out how you can discipline your child without pulling out the last stop. And when you're angry, when you're upset, walk away from the situation and come back and deal with it after. So try and also regulate yourself, control yourself before you go into your discipline action.
Mm. I mean, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, I want us to get back into, the challenges that needs to be still addressed to fully protect children's rights globally. Because as much as we're speaking about the good that has been happening to make sure that children's rights are celebrated and they are there and implemented, there are still a lot of rights that are also being violated globally, and we're still seeing, some very scary statistics around children's rights being violated. What challenges are those, and how can we work towards bettering them?
I mean, whilst we have made astounding progress in terms of the children's welfare, we also do have a lot of challenges.
Mm.
So, these challenges, some of which are above our control as an individual, but in a collective effort can be addressed. So, we can look at things like a lot of children are living on the margins, okay? So, there are children that are still exposed to extreme poverty and extreme malnourishment. There are issues where there's global crunch and the economy is falling apart and it is affecting our children.
Mm.
And then, whilst we all have access to education, quality education is not yet accessible to all. So there's still a big lag in the quality of education that privileged children get as opposed to those in the socially and economically disadvantaged communities, right? So we still have those barriers to learning and education, but we're also seeing new challenges coming up, like in the digital space. Our children are not safe anymore. So there's online issues that are coming up, and our children are experiencing bullying. They are being violated. They are being coerced into things that really affect their lives, and that has a psychological effect on them. And I mean, the instability we have in this world currently also affects their mental health. So over and above that, when we come home again to South Africa, we still have a lot of challenges with, for example, girls facing period poverty, which has them out of school or experiencing truancy on days where they have their cycle. We have a lot of an astounding amount of abuse on the boy children, be it sexual abuse or physical abuse. It is an alarming case right now, and we still need to actively do something about it. And I think generally, statistics are showing a lot of school violence, which is indicative of other challenges that the children are facing. We still have children committing suicide. We still have substance abuse. So there is still a lot of work to be done. But over and above, I think we are moving in the right direction.
Most definitely. And now, in departure, or rather in closing our discussion, what message would you like children and adults to take away from National Children's Day?
I think the message for the children is we see you, we love you, we appreciate you. We want you to grow in a safe and healthy space, which is what every child deserves. For adults, it falls on us to ensure that this world is a safe space for our children. No child should go without safety, without love, and without being noticed. Collectively, I think we need to stand up as a nation and rigorously address the safety and the health of our children. No child should be left behind.
I mean, that's so beautiful, Norleen. Thank you so much for joining us and just for, highlighting National Children's Day that took place on Saturday, but most importantly, making sure that everything that, applies to that day applies to every single other day. It's not just about, Saturday that has passed, but it's just making sure that we always prioritizing, early childhood development and also children's rights. So thank you so much for always sharing your valuable insights.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I think in parting, I'd like to say a quote that I love so much by Nelson Mandela, and he says there can be no keener revelation of of the society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. So how we treat our children actually reveals who we are internally, and we need to do as much as we can for these children.
That's a great parting word indeed. Thank you so much for that, Nolene. And we'll forever, just remember that. And I hope viewers at home that are watching right now take into consideration and the seriousness of this conversation so that we can have a better future and better communities for our little ones. Thank you so much, viewers at home. That was Norleen Zulu, and we were talking about National Children's Day that took place on Saturday, but also we shared such valuable insights on the progress that has been made, the challenges that we are still facing, and what we can do as a community to make sure that we are still fighting for children's rights and we're still advocating for childhood, development or early childhood development in making sure that we've got a safe society for children and making sure that their rights are being advocated for. But on that note, it's time for us to head over to a quick break. We shall see you after this.